Okay, I think everything is working and we're ready to get started today. So welcome to everybody and thank you. My name is Peter Franzese. I'm with the City of Concord and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today on our virtual conversation around reducing waste. First, I want to welcome all of you watching on Zoom and on Facebook. And we'll be introducing first our panelists for today. Robin Barham is our solid waste director. Say hello, Robin. I think Robin's muted.
I am, I'm sorry. Hi, everyone.
And then Mandy Smith-Thompson is our environmental educator.
Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Okay, and so today we're going to answer your questions about a variety of solid waste services and topics. Robin, could you tell us a little bit about our solid waste department and the services you provide?
Sure. Let me start off by saying we're a department of about 36 and a half employees. The majority of those employees are in yard waste. However, we do contract out quite a bit of our services. We serve approximately 34,500 homes each and every week in Concord, which is a very large service area. In addition to the contracted service we have with Waste Pro, we do provide yard waste services. We provide loose leaf services during the loose leaf season for all of our residents. We also provide cart management services for everyone in the city. The carts are owned by the city. And we also provide some commingled recycling collection for small businesses and schools in our area. Now, under our Waste Pro contract are the services that most of our citizens are used to receiving. That would be your weekly garbage service, your bi-weekly recycling and bulky waste services. And like I said, those are all done by our contractor, which is Waste Pro. In addition to those, we have compliance in the department, which helps us ensure that folks are paying attention to the ordinance, to the rules. We have 2 compliance inspectors that go out and help educate. Their role is informing people of what needs to happen and not so much punishing or violating folks. So we have that function. And then we have environmental education, which we're happy to have Mandy, who works part of the time for us in the department. So I think that's a good overview. If you need more, I'll be glad to give it.
Thank you, Robin. So today, during the hour, we're going to talk about reducing waste. We have received a lot of questions from those of you who pre-registered for our Zoom webinar, and we'll get to hear about a variety of the services that Robin described through those questions. But we will be here for an hour. So if you hear something that inspires a question, feel free to send it to us in the Q&A if you're on Zoom. If you're watching live on Facebook, you can drop us a comment and we'll also get the question that way. And we'll try to answer any questions that we receive if time is available. We are going to focus on the questions we received in advance. And perhaps the biggest question people have is around recycling and knowing what is and is not acceptable. The first question we want to answer today came from Crystal, who asked, who decides what items can be recycled?
That is an excellent question, and I'll take it. So who decides? And it sounds like maybe the City of Concord would decide, but that's not true. While it is our job to communicate that information to our citizens, the folks who really get to decide what's acceptable for recycling is the folks that operate our local material recovery facility. And when I say our, it is not owned by the City of Concord. It's actually owned by Mecklenburg County. The one that Concord uses is called Metrolina Recycling Center. And the role that they play is they accept all of the curbside recyclable materials from Concord and other municipalities around the area. They sort it, they bale it like bales of hay, and then they actually sell it off to be processed and manufactured into something new. So the reason that there exists a material recovery facility that would even take stuff from us, recyclables wise, is because there is a profit to be made in the sorting and the processing and the selling of those materials. And that makes sense because there is a cost associated with sorting and baling and selling those materials. So they know what they can sell and make money off of, and therefore they know what they want the citizens of Concord and other municipalities to send to them. So to short answer that question, it is the Material Recovery Facility, or the MRF, as we like to refer to it in the recycling world.
And if I could maybe make it even shorter, they're really deciding based on what the market tells them.
That is true.
That means it could change over time, which might be confusing to folks because maybe 10 years ago we could take something and right now we can't. And so are there guidelines available to help us know what is recyclable and what is not right now? If I could paraphrase, and that question came from Timothy, are there guidelines available to help us decide? I'm going to like to paraphrase that. Is there an app for that?
Yes, there is an app for that. It is available free of charge in the Apple or Android store, and it's called Cartology. And Cartology not only can help you figure out through the Waste Wizard function what is acceptable and what's not acceptable for recycling, but it can also help you set reminders for when your garbage and your recycling collection day is. It's a pretty handy tool, and it is a collaboration among unincorporated Cabarrus County, the city of Concord, and the city of Kannapolis. So no matter where you live within those three municipalities, you can download that app, pop in your address, and it will help you learn all that you need to know about recycling.
And for folks who live in Concord, they can also go to our website, concordnc.gov/what's-my-day, and they could find a web-based version of that where you could even use it on a computer without downloading the app, but it'll also get you to the app if you go to that website.
And there's probably some folks out there who are not interested in necessarily the app, although I recommend the app for everybody. I wanted to share the screen, if that's okay, and pop over to the City of Concord's website and show you where you can download and print a PDF copy of all the acceptable materials. So bear with me, I've never shared my screen before. Let's see if this works. Okay. So first thing I want to do is go to concordnc.gov/solid waste. And when you get there, on the left-hand side, under residential, you'll see recycling. Click on recycling, and right there on the page, you'll see the list of acceptable materials. If it's not here, that means it's not acceptable. You'll also see some more information on the Cartology app down here. But this image, if you click on it, it takes you to a downloadable and printable PDF version of all the acceptable materials that we got straight from the material recovery facility that takes our stuff. So that's it.
Thanks, Mandy.
Sure.
Well, so there's some things that are acceptable and some things that are not. I've got another question from Cheryl in that line, who wants to know, what can we do with the things that say recyclable, or maybe they have a symbol on them, but yet Concord does not want them?
You know, we have a colleague in Cabarrus County who always likes to say, well, everything is recyclable in some way, shape, or form. But the real question we should be asking is the item acceptable? And so while there may be items that are marketed as recyclable, that does not necessarily mean that they are acceptable when it comes to the items that our material recovery facility wants from Concord citizens. So if it is not on the list, if you can't find it on Cartology, then you can simply figure out a way to reuse it, or you can throw that item in the trash, because really what we want to do is avoid contaminating our recycling containers, which means putting stuff in there that the material recovery facility really doesn't want, because that actually ends up in the trash anyway.
So just to follow up on that, I know one example of things that is a recyclable material, but we certainly don't want it in the recycling carts or to find their way to the MRF, are all those plastic grocery bags and plastic film and all those sorts of things. Now, the good news is we have a place at many grocery stores to take those sorts of items, grocery bags from the store. But are there other things that you could take to that grocery store recycling station?
Yeah, I know at one time it was very easy, like you said, to take plastic bags, plastic film, plastic wrap to the grocery store. And also, it doesn't matter if you are taking, let's say, a Walmart bag to Food Lion. They don't care as long as it is plastic bag, film, or wrap. You can take the plastic strapping that would come like wrapped around like a TV box that you buy at the store. That is acceptable for recycling there, as well as produce and bread bags. Some stores will also accept things like compact fluorescent light bulbs and batteries, and that just really depends on the location. There's also a really awesome service available to all Cabarrus County citizens. It is owned and operated by Cabarrus County itself, and it is the Cabarrus County Household Hazardous Waste Facility. They do have a place where you can drop off your recyclables, but also they take things like paint and batteries and other items and recycle those. And you can go on Cabarrus County's website to learn more, or you can give them a call at 704-920-EARTH.
Thank you. All right, next question. This one came from James, who asks, for plastic bottles that can be recycled, may we include the lid? This has changed over the years, so I can't wait to hear your answer today.
Well, so just to make sure that the information is most up to date, I reached out to our contacts at the Material Recovery Facility just prior to this webinar and confirmed that it is okay to leave screw-on plastic lids on top of the plastic bottles, jugs, and jars for recycling. However, there are plastic containers with lids that the container itself is not acceptable for recycling. For example, a butter tub or a yogurt tub or something like that. And all of that, the lid and everything is unacceptable.
And those items were certainly acceptable for a long time, but over the last few years that has changed, and the numbers of the types of plastics that are acceptable now has certainly decreased, but we want to keep our stream clean. I got a similar question from Jamie, who maybe you can expand on what you were just saying. Jamie wants to know, are there any flat lids that we can recycle? Are there certain widths that are acceptable?
Good question. I'm going to call a flat lid one that you just press down to connect to the container, like I was talking about a butter tub or a yogurt tub or something like that. That is not, those are not acceptable. The only plastic lids that are acceptable are those that can be screwed onto a bottle, jug, or jar, and they need to be connected to that bottle, jug, or jar. And the reason for that is when the materials get to the material recovery facility, they are sorted with a series of automated machinery. And so if we put loose, tiny lids in there, those little lids can fall down into the equipment and jam things up. So if you're going to recycle them at all, make sure they're connected to the bottle, jug, or jar. Another lid that wasn't necessarily discussed that I will talk about is like a metal lid that goes on a pickle jar or any other glass jar. Those are acceptable. They are a screw on top. They are a different material than the glass. So in that case, we want to separate that if possible. It is okay to leave them on because when the glass is recycled, it actually gets broken. And usually that metal lid can be pulled out by a magnet separator. But just to be on the safe side, we really recommend that we separate that glass and metal.
So this screw on top you mentioned, that sounds to me like a peanut butter jar. Perhaps the plastic jar with the plastic lid, and you want it screwed on there and keep it together, which leads to the next question, which came from Laura. Laura wants to know, do you have to rinse out recyclables?
That's a good question too. So we don't want to put in a whole container of peanut butter. We don't want to put in a whole jar of mayonnaise. We want to get those things emptied out as best we can. But it is not required that you say run your mayonnaise jar through the dishwasher. We don't want to get that specific about being clean. We just want to make sure that there's not any food left inside the container. You want to clean it out as best you can because it makes your recycling container stink. And frankly, it can attract insects and rodents and stuff, and nobody likes that.
So Robin, that's something for your kids to remember, I think. Rinse out the mayonnaise jar as best they can, but no dishwashing.
Right.
All right. So next question comes from Regina, and this one's a hard question. We're going to elevate the level of questions here. Do we know what percentage of North Carolina is recycling, and do we know how successful they are? And she also asked, is recycling even mandatory?
Also a great question. So I will preface by saying that we have some information, but the city of Concord does not typically keep data that is statewide. But I did reach out to a colleague at North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality to just kind of get a feel for what information they do have. And while I don't have a percentage, I did learn that there are 327 recycling programs in communities across the state. So there's that. As far as are they successful or not, that's kind of a tricky question to answer. We measure success in the recycling world in two ways. One would be participation rate, which is basically how many folks, how many households are setting out recycling at the curb for collection. Okay, that's one way. Another way is contamination rate, which means how well are we doing? How well are we abiding by those parameters that are set up by the material recovery facility? Are we putting stuff in the container that we shouldn't? And I can tell you that statewide, especially ever since around the year 2011, when a lot of the country and Concord went to a single stream recycling program where we could just mix everything in one container, participation rates went way up. So more and more and more people started paying attention and participating in recycling. But with that increase in participation, we also saw, and it's a nationwide issue, an increase in contamination. So folks began putting things in there even more that was not acceptable. So are they successful? By some measures, yes. By some measures, no. But that's not to shed a lot of doom and gloom on the situation, because these are things that can be addressed by increased education and increased, cart tagging and things that Concord is already doing. So we can work this out. We can reduce our contamination rate, and I think we will. And then the last question, is recycling mandatory? And the answer is no, it is not mandatory in Concord.
If I can, I want to jump in and just say, add on to what Mandy just talked about with recycling not mandatory, but our residents know we only get one garbage cart as part of your residential curbside service. So we encourage folks to recycle as a way of reducing their waste, being able to live with that one garbage cart, being collected once per week, because a lot of us just couldn't. So recycling is a great way to do that. A second garbage cart, if you were to ask for one for the city, is $9 per month. So it's a good way to avoid that, using your recycle bin, but using it for the right items, the right materials, not using it as a second trash can. We do not ever want that to happen, but certainly, that recycling cart helps you manage your waste on a weekly basis.
And I'll add too that using the recycling cart for a second trash can is one way to cost yourself and the city more money. Is that right, Robin?
Yes.
And
we can take it from you if you repeatedly do that. We can actually pull your recycle bin and take it back, and you're no longer able to use it.
It's my understanding that even if Concord citizens put a whole lot of trash and contamination in our recycling, that when we get to the material recovery facility, they could tell us to turn around and go away because we have too much junk. And I also heard that we could be fined as a city too if we continue to bring in too much junk in the recycling.
Yes, there are fines that can be assessed to us for bringing in high loads of contamination, and they do check.
In terms of measuring success, and we talked about participation rate and contamination rate, other measures I've heard of before, and I'm wondering if maybe as the market has changed, they're not necessarily as important or tracked, but what about something like tonnage, or which of course, when you have a lot of glass, there's a lot of tonnage, and maybe we don't have as much glass anymore. And then what about diversion rates? Is that something we're tracking?
We do track the diversion rate each month. It has remained fairly stable. I will say that with all of the things that have happened with COVID-19, the diversion rate's actually gotten a bit better, but it's just because there's so much being put into recycling and garbage at the moment. It's kind of skewed in the numbers being that, we've had a lot of contamination since COVID-19 started. I mean, that's just a truthful statement, because folks are trying to, they're at home, they've been at home, they've cleaned out things, they've done a lot of things that have increased their volume or their, amount of waste just in general. So we've really had to stay vigilant during this time, with that, watching it. But the diversion rate has actually been pretty stable over the last couple of years here.
And just to clarify that for any of our viewers who may have never heard that term before, the diversion rate refers to the tonnage, I believe, or the amount of materials that would have otherwise been in the landfill. So how much material are we keeping out of the landfill by recycling?
It's roughly about 14% and has been.
Okay.
So not, in the grand scheme of things, not a big number. I mean, 14% is not a huge number, but
Sure.
we're always wanting it to be more, but like Mandy says, we're wanting it to be clean recyclables. It does no good if it's diverting it, going to the MRF and then it's rejected and brought back to the landfill. So
Sure.
we definitely need it to be clean.
And this does lead to our next question, which came from a second person named Crystal. This one, it says, what happens to items after the truck picks them up? It's specifically recycling. And how do I see the impact I'm having by choosing to recycle? And then another person asked kind of a similar question. How do we know it's not going into the trash?
Oh, good questions. So basically what we're doing is we're going to talk about what happens between the consumer, which is us, having waste products, and then a manufacturer somewhere who wants to take those waste products and can effectively and profitably turn them into a new product. So we've got to connect the dots between those two things, right? So you put the right stuff in your recycling container, you push it out to the curb, the truck comes and picks it up. It goes directly then to the material recovery facility. It is sorted, is baled, and it is sold. Sometimes it's further processed, and then it goes to a manufacturer. And the manufacturer then turns those items into something else. So what kinds of things are your old recyclables becoming? Let's talk about plastic. When plastic melts, it can actually be stretched and it becomes kind of fibrous. So this is something that is used to make carpet. It's also used to make some types of clothing. Polar fleece is an example. Plastic can also become the composite decking, the plastic, looks like plastic boards that are, used for decks and other construction projects. So that's plastic. Then it can also, be turned into new plastic containers, and even like electronics materials. If you ever see like a black takeout container or meal prep containers, a lot of times that is actually post-consumer electronic materials. So then metal usually ends up becoming new metal containers, melted down. What else? Paper. There's actually a manufacturer in North Carolina who brings in paper, and it looks like it is straight from your house. I've actually took a tour of the facility, and it's a paper mill. They take in your old paper, and it literally goes in and it's all squished up, and it comes out as a couple different things: facial tissues, paper towels, and even toilet paper. So that's kind of interesting right here happening in North Carolina. And then glass gets recycled and it gets added to like reflective paint or asphalt or things like that. If you're ever out on the road and you kind of pay attention to when the sunlight shines on the road, you'll see it kind of glittery and reflecting back at you. And sometimes that's recycled glass. The same for the paint that reflects in the dark when your headlights land on it. Road paint and signs too can be made from glass.
Mandy, this reminds me of what I've heard you tell many a third grader. In other words, all this stuff is all around us, and every time we can recycle and cause materials to be made from something that we already have, that is a time that we don't have to go to the earth for those raw materials, right? So that's at the end of the day, the main point in all this.
Absolutely. Protecting natural resources is paramount. I mean, that's the reason why we're concerned about recycling for ethical reasons because, you know, every time, like you said, we're using our old paper to make new paper, we're not cutting down more trees, and trees growing out in their natural state are way more valuable to us, providing ecosystem services like providing oxygen and home for wildlife and keeping our planet cool and all those other great things that trees do, is certainly better than going to the earth for those raw materials. And just thinking about, you know, mining for metals or, you know, using petroleum and refining it to make plastic. If we can rely on those materials we've already gotten from the environment and use them up before we go back, that's a much more sustainable way to be. And, you know, I will say this here, recycling is just one example of how we can reduce waste. And it's just one way that we can affect the diversion rate of materials from the landfill. You know, shopping secondhand and repairing things that are broken and reusing items are other ways too. Just thinking outside the box of recycling as a means for waste reduction. There's more ways than just one.
Thanks. And thinking of that, you know, for somebody that wants to make a difference, and maybe we have folks tuning in that aren't here in Concord or Cabarrus County, for those who live in a community that does not have a curbside recycling program, is recycling still an option for them? Is there something they could do to get a curbside program started in their community if they don't have one?
Two thoughts on that. Number one, just because your community is not providing curbside recycling, and I actually live outside of the city limits of Concord in a different county, and I am not provided with curbside recycling collection, but my county provides a convenience center where I can take my materials myself and recycle them there. All I have to do is transport it and they take care of everything else. So I would say make sure that you look at what your county offers before you think that recycling isn't something that's easily available to you. But the other thing I would think about is contacting your elected officials. If this is something that you would like in your community and it's not available to you, start talking with the folks who make rules in your area and tell them your interest.
Well, thanks. And, you know, here locally in Cabarrus County, I think we have a relatively unique situation in that there is curbside recycling service and even curbside garbage service, which doesn't exist everywhere, available in the unincorporated area in Cabarrus County. Robin, could you speak a little bit about the special arrangement that Cabarrus County has set up for that?
Well, I don't want to speak for them directly, but I know that the county has an agreement with Republic Services for those unincorporated areas, and it does cover garbage and recycling. It is fee-based, and I know that the county often serves as an advocate, you know, for folks who, you know, may have issues or may request more services or want options. I know that the county you know, provides that advocacy for residents, but they also use the Cartology app that city residents have. So if you're out in the county and you would like to learn a little bit more about what's provided there, the Cartology app will cover your address, even out in the incorporated county.
Thanks.
You know, Peter, before you move on to the next question, that kind of reminds me, there may be some folks on here who are living in multifamily housing apartment complexes. And in the city of Concord, it's the responsibility of the owner of those properties to provide a recycling collection for the residents. And so there are sometimes folks whose property owner does not provide that service. And I wanted to make sure Concord citizens are aware that if that is your situation, you can take advantage of Cabarrus County. They have some convenience centers where you can carry your own recycling over there if that is something that you're interested in.
And I think there's locations in the Concord area, Kannapolis area, and perhaps even a few others.
Mm-hmm. These are all available on Cabarrus County's solid waste website.
And I think the Cartology app could also help pinpoint some of those locations as well. So, okay, well, here's my question. Does it cost more for us to do this, to recycle, than it would to just go ahead and send everything to the landfill?
I'm going to answer that one, and I'm going to be truthful, and I'm going to say yes. Right now it does. There was a time in which it didn't. I remember when our proceeds from recycling, you know, the sale of those materials was close to what we were spending, for the particular program. It's not that way anymore. I won't get into the long history of what's happened with China and recyclables, but the bottom line is we got sloppy. That's just kind of my viewpoint on it. We started letting more and more contamination go in the recycling. When it went to the commingled single stream, it was hard to weed those items out that shouldn't be in there. So after a while, China, taking most of the world's recyclables, got tired of seeing the contamination there. And that's when they started rejecting materials. They've pretty much stopped altogether taking materials. So then it became, the responsibility of folks, locally to produce a better source of recycled materials, cleaner products. And that boils down to the man hours. So the man hours that it takes for a MRF to produce cleaner materials in order to get a profit, to find someone who'll buy those, bales the way they are, they have to be cleaner. So cleaner equals more man hours equals more expense. So last year, the MRF gave us a sizable increase in the amount that we were paying for recyclables. We also lost pretty much most of our profits. We're still getting profits from recycled cardboard. That's still somewhat healthy. But in terms of the MRF, we're not receiving any money from them now. We're only paying them. Now, from what I understand, the next agreement that we have with Mecklenburg County includes some changes that they're making and also some capital improvements that they're making. So these improvements that they make are more technology driven. They require less people to sort and clean recyclables. So we're hoping, there's the cost of the capital improvements going up, but the man hours coming down required to produce a clean source. So we're very interested in seeing what our costs look like in recycling in the future. We hope they come down. But truthfully, right now, we're spending more on recycling. But the kicker to all of this is, and the reason we're okay with it, is because we have a landfill as a source of, that is our resource for garbage. That landfill has an expiration in which it's not available to us anymore. And for any of you who are watching who didn't know this, the city of Concord can take its residential waste there to that landfill with no disposal cost whatsoever. And that's about $2 million worth of disposal for free each year that we're getting. So the life of the landfill is why we still need to recycle. We need to reduce waste, like Mandy talked. It's not just recycling, it's reduction. But we need to extend the life of that landfill because we're all ultimately going to pay for it. When that landfill is full, we're going to be paying those costs because there's nowhere else in the city limits that it can go.
So just to push you a little bit on that question, because this is something that I've heard, and I think those of us that work at the city hear this a lot. People want to know exactly how much longer the landfill is going to last. And we have a landfill right here in our backyard, but it serves a large part of North Carolina. So it's not just our waste going there, as you mentioned. We benefit from having it located here, but how much longer really is it going to last? Do we know? And if so, how exactly do we even know that time frame?
Okay. I will be, open and say that we've discussed the time frame of the landfill with landfill staff directly. The landfill at Charlotte Motor Speedway is operated by Republic Services. They've had a long-standing agreement with the city to provide us, a place for us to take our waste. Our discussions with them, and they've said it in the press, so I'm not saying anything that's a secret, but they've said about 15 years. And they're finishing up one cell that they're in right now that has some life in it, and then they have one more that they either have permits for or have space for that's in their permitted, range. It's within the realm of the area they're already working in. And that will last about 15 years. And that's not very far in our kind of our long range planning. 15 years will be here before we know it, because we'll have to have a source, for where a place for where that goes. Now, as far as the waste that they accept most everything in Mecklenburg County, Charlotte. There's everything on north of Charlotte up until you get about Davidson area comes into that landfill. tremendous amount of waste coming in there. If you think about residential, but then you have to think about industrial, commercial, businesses, all of those. The next closest landfill to us is in Uwharrie, which is a good 45 minutes to an hour drive from here. So, the tonnages there are what has given them that picture. It's not just the city of Concord, it's everyone together. So kind of our concerns going forward for all of Cabarrus County is we need to be in discussions with, our residents, obviously, but also businesses, commercial, industrial, our partners in looking at the amount of time we have left and what can we do to reduce waste in order to maybe, extend that life of the landfill a little bit. Because all of our costs are going to go up when that landfill is finished. When it's closed out, every single one of us are going to end up paying more for that. So,
because at that point we're talking about a transfer station and trucks to take our waste elsewhere, perhaps, and just a very much higher cost of transport and disposal costs associated with that process.
Sure. And in our preliminary discussions with them, they've mentioned with Republic, they've mentioned transfer stations. I don't want to speak for them, and say that that's what they're going to do, but it's really difficult to permit a new landfill, especially in this area. But honestly, even in your smaller rural counties, it's harder to permit a landfill. So our options are going to be, transfer station with Republic. We could also look to see if there are private companies, other companies that are building landfills or interested in landfill space. And then also we could work with our partners, in the region, not just Cabarrus County, but our neighboring counties in Stanley or Rowan. We could look for other space as well. That's why I said even 15 years isn't a long period of time when you're talking about major decisions like that. Whether we use an existing landfill or someone wants to try and permit a new one, those decisions are tough, they're hard, they have environmental concerns, they never make folks happy. No one wants to live near a landfill, we know that. So those conversations, I can tell you, they're starting to occur. In the next month or so, we're going to have one of our first area meetings, at least Cabarrus County-wide, and talking about the future of solid waste. So it's coming. And that's about the time I retire. So I don't know how much, I'll be in the part of this, but certainly the planning stages are coming soon.
But in the meantime, is there something we can do here to perhaps prolong the life of the landfill? I think you indicated there might be, but what is that? What can we do? And then tying back to our last conversation around recycling and what it costs, what can people do to help keep that cost down?
I know Mandy's probably going to want to jump in on this one too, but I would say for recycling, it's keeping the contamination out, clean recycling. That gives us our best opportunity to sell those products, to folks easier, maybe even starting to get some revenue back from the sale of materials, but the recycling needs to be clean. On the waste side, waste reduction, encompasses a lot of things. It's reducing, it's reusing, it's recycling, all those things that we need folks to do. As far as the landfill is concerned, the reduction of anything that goes to the landfill is important. We're kind of hit with a double whammy with recycling costs and future landfill costs, and we're trying to manage both sides of it. But certainly reduction and reuse are going to be major focus of our department in the coming years.
Thanks.
Mandy, do you have more?
Of course, I love to talk about waste reduction, and I want to just bring it home. I mean, in your day-to-day life, can you think about things that, could reduce the amount of stuff that you're buying, that you're using, that you're throwing away? And I have personally made many trips up and down the road around Concord over the past 13 years that I've worked in the city, and I've went through neighborhoods on trash day, and I've seen so many good things out by the curb sitting there waiting to be picked up and thrown away because somebody redecorated their home or got something new and didn't need it anymore. And I think our local thrift stores are screaming when they see these kinds of things too. places like Goodwill and the Habitat for Humanity Restore and countless others, Salvation Army, also the Kidney Foundation, I know, in pre-COVID times would certainly come to people's homes and pick up stuff that could be resold, that these charities, and CVAN is one that's located right in Concord, that want to take still good stuff from citizens and then resell it and take that money and put it into charitable work. So not only is it serving the community through charity to donate your still good stuff, but it's also helping with that diversion rate and keeping our landfill open longer. I would also suggest just shopping for secondhand clothes and secondhand furniture ourselves. It's a good way to save money, but it also helps to, supply those charities with needed monies and just, to, like I said, reduce waste. And think about you guys that do crafting and gardening. We can reuse all kinds of things. We can share equipment with our neighbors instead of buying, 2 sets of garden tools. Is there a place that we can place them both and we can all share? I mean, there's just lots and lots of different ideas if we really sit and think about it. And also business owners, take a look at your business and look at all the things that you're throwing away and see if there is a way that you can reduce that. Sometimes all it takes is just kind of a survey and some thinking, some creative thinking, and you can figure out how not to make as much waste in the first place.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we have still got about 20 minutes on our time, so I think we're doing okay. And we still have a few more questions that were given to us in advance, and then we have started receiving some questions live, and I think we will have some time to get to those as well. We got a question from Stacy, who wants to know why aren't there more recycling bins out and about in public spaces, and how can someone arrange recycling collection for neighborhood pools and clubhouses?
Okay. As far as recycling bins out in the public, and I guess not having your question expanded upon, my guess is, could that be on downtown sidewalks, or are we talking city parks or things like that? The city tries to put recycling containers where we can. I would say we probably could improve that in terms of the placement or the number of those. In your more open areas that are private, we don't have the directive to do that, I guess, in terms of where we put recycling. There are very few public places outside of city facilities where we do have recycling containers. I will answer the part about the pools and clubhouses. And I'm not sure if folks know this, but if you have a neighborhood HOA or a pool area, we do offer a free garbage and recycling service for the summer months. And we do have quite a few who take advantage of this. If you call through customer care or through the solid waste department, which you're welcome to contact me. I think Valerie Proper's name is on our website as well. She's our customer service rep inside the department. But we do offer drop off of 2 garbage carts and 1 recycling bin for a pool for the summer. It is free. We'll drop them off at the beginning of the season, and then in September, we'll come back and get them. As far as year-long containers for the clubhouse, we do consider those small businesses, but they are available for $20 per month for a garbage rollout and a recycling container. So the recycling's free, but the garbage one is considered a small business, and it's roughly $20 a month, which isn't bad if you're having some events within your clubhouse, things like that. You would just need to contact us to set up an account for that. But certainly the pools, they're free. Take advantage of it. We encourage people to recycle. We'll give you the recycling carts as well.
And so folks, the number to call, whether it's that or whether you have any issues with your solid waste services and we could assist you, here's a number you hopefully have heard before, but I'll take this chance to say it. It's 920-704-920-5555. That's our customer care team who can help you with a whole range of city services, but definitely this is one of them. And our next question comes from Patty, who wants to know, is there a way for Waste Pros drivers to see what's going into their trucks? If so, what's done if they see that items are going, if there are items that shouldn't be in the garbage or recycling cart?
Okay, I'll answer this first by saying, if you're a resident and you've ever been at home and a recycling or a garbage cart was not emptied and the lid was up, sometimes leaving that lid up is a great way for the driver to see what's in that cart. So a lot of times with our recycling carts, if the lid's up, we can see that it's bagged, which is a no-no. We shouldn't be bagging our recyclables, or you'll see trash in it, or you'll see yard waste in it. So that is one of the first opportunities that Waste Pro drivers have to see what's being set out for recycling. Now, there's good and bad in this, but if the cart is closed, or once they are starting to empty the cart in the top of the truck, I'm using my hands here, I'm sorry, I'm always animated with my hands. Once it's tipping into the truck, there are video cameras mounted above that opening. So a driver can visually see what is being dumped as it's being emptied out into the cart.
So when it's too late, in other words.
I'm sorry, yes, too late. Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. Too late. Now, if we know it's heavily contaminated and the MRF is going to reject anything, typically they reject about 20% contamination. So if a truck is that high in contamination. So the Waste Pro driver has to make a decision based on what he's seeing, if that's too much contamination. If it were an entire cart of dirt or something, like that, then he's going to need to radio his supervisor and they're probably going to pull the load. So they only see it when it's being dumped, when it's too late. The good news is that they do see it though, which is encouraging to us. There's not enough manpower to walk around the city and open everyone's garbage or recycling bins before we empty them. And I think a lot of residents would have issue probably with us if we were, had people out on the streets looking into your bins before we empty them. So we can't do that. But certainly anything that we see that's going in, that is our chance for the driver to stop the route. He can take it to the landfill, unload what he has, and then, come back and start afresh. But it has happened, and they do report that. Now, if they visibly see things that are contaminated, they're not to pick it up, and they're to put a door hanger. It's like a little cart tag on your cart that tells you that you were not collected today, and this is why. And when those happen, those little door tags come back to the city, to our compliance folks who are here in our building. And we have 2 compliance inspectors who will go out and provide education. And once you've got that cart cleaned up, then they'll arrange for service to come back and get it. So it's not kind of the end of the day when your cart's been tagged for contamination. You have a chance to resolve it. Once it is resolved, we will have Waste Pro come back and get it. And that does happen quite a bit as well.
Will that notification and education happen in the too late case as well, where it winds up in the truck?
It will, yes.
Okay. And then what happens if we have a repeat customer who has this challenge over and over again? Do they get to continue, or will there be some additional level? Will their cart go away, et cetera? What happens in that case?
Our ordinance actually says 3 or more violations, we can pull the recycling cart. We try not to do that. Oftentimes it might be the case of a child was putting things in the recycling bin, and perhaps the child made a wrong decision, or it was someone who was staying with them and they weren't familiar with the rules. So, we try to be understanding, we try to educate, but our ordinance does say that after 3 violations, we can pull the recycling cart. There are homes and addresses in the city that do not have recycling for that reason. But that's a last resort for us because we really, truly want folks to recycle and to recycle right as part of our campaign. That's our goal. Our goal is not to pull the cart because we have less recycling, more garbage from those homes. We truly want them to try and get it right.
Patty asked a question in a different part of our services, but certainly one that we have challenges from time to time with this. And so here's Patty's question. Thinking about bulky waste issues when someone moves, or when a landlord might have a house full of personal items and furniture left behind, how do we educate landlords and property owners in our community with information on how to dispose items that might be left behind? Are there rules about what can and can't be picked up for our bulky waste program? And how much is too much? And so I asked you a bunch of questions there, so I can, if you need me to repeat one of them, just let me know.
Okay. Our bulky waste guidelines, well, let me first start by saying bulky waste is probably an issue in the city that everyone on this, in this conversation has seen or noticed. Folks set out things within the limits, but set them out too early. Or folks set out way more than we can allow. I'm going to hold this up. This is a solid waste resource guide. This is online. It's a brochure that has lots of pages in it with information. Our bulky waste rules, according to the city ordinance and in this resource guide, allow up to 10 cubic yards of bulky waste every 2 weeks. So we do collect bulky waste on an every other week basis. And you can have up to 10 cubic yards setting out. Now, a lot of you say, what's 10 cubic yards? It's roughly 10 garbage carts lined up together. So if I have each of these carts and I just imagine what 10 of them look like sitting side by side on the street, that's about the amount of waste 10 cubic yards is. That's a sizable amount. It may not cover an entire house move out, or someone who's had to evict a resident and everything's being put out. It won't cover those. But this particular guideline in the resource guide covers the whole 2-page spread is on bulky waste. So it tells you what can and can't be set out. And, there are some things that we can't accept. We can't accept concrete, for example. But we can accept large items that have been dismantled, swing sets, all kinds of things like that. But these guidelines are very helpful. If you do have construction debris, though, the guidelines are only for 4 cubic yards per set out. So of that 10 max, you can only have 4 that are construction debris. And we do see a lot of small construction projects in the city, and there's specific guidelines on that as well. So in getting to that part, that's what can be set out legally with ordinance. My suggestions for folks who have more, who have large projects, who have an entire house set out, you can contact all of the private companies, that are local, the Waste Pros, the Waste Management, Waste Industries Republic. They all offer services where they can bring a small container to your house and everything can be put in it, and then they'll haul it away. Now, there is a sizable, a cost to that. It's not cheap, but I think it's very reasonable. And that's what we encourage folks to do when they have the large amounts of waste. Now, in areas where someone has set out an entire house, say it's a landlord and they've set out everything and it's above 10 cubic yards, what's going to happen is we're going to be notified, we're going to tag it, we're going to go and talk, our compliance folks are going to go and talk to the resident, and they're going to contact the person who owns the property, and they're going to give them guidelines, give them suggestions of ways to get this cleaned up. And if they don't get it cleaned up within a reasonable time frame, they're going to be referred to code enforcement. So a lot of times, our residents may call and say, there's a house down the street, that stuff's been sitting out there for 2 weeks and no one's doing anything about it. And what we can or can't say is that it may be with code enforcement. They may be taking legal actions to get that removed, or the city removes it and they have to pay the cost. So that happens as well, but code enforcement gets involved when people don't want to comply. But I will say, whenever you have large amounts of bulky waste, there are ways that we can help you manage it. There are options out there. If you'll contact us, if you'll be in touch with people, if you'll use the resource guide, or if you need additional help, we can get private companies to come and help you. But there are ways to get around it. Code enforcement for us is a very last resort.
And it sounds like, to the original question of what should those who are landlords and dealing with the move out issues at times, it sounds like their best advice is to be tuned into those private companies that can provide a container for them, and that way they can be in place before the items are coming out of the residence, that it could be there ready to go and it could be handled in a kind of a timely fashion.
Yes, and they're also welcome to work with our compliance inspectors. They do go out in the community, they go to HOA meetings, they talk with areas that have high percentages of rental properties. We know a lot of those neighborhoods in the city. So they're available as a resource. Granted, like I said, if it's more than 10 cubic yards, we can't necessarily fix it for them, but there might be some things that we can help, or we can take all of these items because these are in compliance. you're welcome to set out all the furniture, but all the other things we need to think about a different resource for getting rid of. So just because you have 20 cubic yards doesn't mean that we won't take the first 10. So we'll work with you as best we can to get it off the street. We want the streets clean. We want, we don't want people rummaging through other folks' waste. We want it gone. We want it, gone as quickly and as cleanly as we can. That's definitely what our compliance folks are here for.
Thank you. One more question before we can get to our questions that were coming in as we were doing this, and I think we're still hopefully pretty good on time. It came from Joe, and he wanted to know if the city has evaluated using rollout containers for grass clippings and light yard waste.
Okay, I'll answer that one as well. For Joe, we have data of what we collect each year, and our data shows that we are about 30% of our yard waste is in bagged waste, whether it's leaves or grass clippings. It's only about 30%. Believe it or not, most of what we pick up are limb piles. So I think for us to evaluate that, we've not taken a really in-depth evaluation, but we know that for changing a service for 30% of our stops on an annual basis would be significant. And the containers have a cost. They're roughly $50 each. So even purchasing carts for the city is well over $1 million if we were to purchase carts for the city. But I do want to bring out a point that maybe a lot of folks are not aware of, is that you can use your own personal container for yard waste. And we have quite a few folks who do it. What you need to do is to clearly mark your own container with yard waste, whether it's painted or stenciled or sticker letters, but it needs to clearly say yard waste. And it needs to be 35 pounds or less, because we don't want folks lifting things that are heavy. And it, can be up to, I think the rules say 44 gallon container or less, clearly marked in yard waste, and we'll dump it that way. So that, you don't have to bag it. I realize bagging can be cumbersome to folks. So that would be my suggestion for Joe, is to buy your own Rubbermaid container, at Walmart, get yard waste on the side and let us empty it that way. But certainly buying carts for the entire city would be a great expense, and only about 30% of our stops each year are for bags. So that would be a significant change for us to make for a smaller percentage of what we see in yard waste. But certainly we want to help. I mean, we want to help. That's why I think that container that you have yourself might be a really good suggestion.
Okay, so we're down to just a few minutes. I'm hoping we can do this. We have 4 questions that came in over the course of the last hour, and I think we can do a lightning round here, hopefully. So the first one came in from Scott. Scott must live in Harrisburg, and thanks for tuning in, Scott. And back when we were talking about cartology, he was wanting to know what it would take to add Harrisburg into our cartology system that we have in the county.
Mandy, do you want that one, or do you want me to take it?
Well, I think we can both talk about this. I think it's fine to say that Harrisburg is looking at joining cartology if they haven't already. So I don't think you have a whole lot of work to do. It never hurts to let your elected officials and your city staff know what you want and what you value. But I think that they're already tracking you on that one.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that they had all the data points of all the addresses in the city, and those were being loaded last I heard. So it may already be
on the way.
Yes.
Okay, the next question came from a Facebook viewer and wanted to know, where do you recycle old tires?
Old tires?
Yes.
Okay. I do want to point out that if you are a resident in a single family home in the city, we do collect tires. I'm sorry for referencing my solid waste guide here, but we can pick up tires with rims removed 2 times per calendar year, and there's a maximum of 8 tires. So I'm not sure where you live, but you can do that.
Do not put your tire in your recycling cart, though.
We do that. And Amanda, do you want to answer the part about, other places you can take it? Or, can we simply just say the Cartology app will tell us that? I can look it up right now, but I'm sure there are options.
Yeah, I'm sure there are too, and I'm having trouble dragging that out of the gray matter at this moment. But definitely, if you're in Concord, you can put these out by the curb. This is an example of something that is recyclable but not acceptable in your curbside rollout cart. But yeah, but I'm not remembering exactly where you can take tires on your own. I think putting them out by the curb is the simplest way for Concord citizens to recycle them.
Or reuse them into a nice tire swing hanger from a tree somewhere, right?
Hey, I like that idea a lot.
I've seen some neat gardening containers made from old tires as well, I believe.
Yep.
We have two questions that came in, one from Teresa, who's with us on Zoom, and one from Facebook that are similar questions. One was, why can't we recycle shredded paper? And the other was, can you put shredded paper in a paper bag and recycle it?
Very good question. Okay, there are two reasons we cannot recycle shredded paper in our curbside recycling containers, because most home shredders shred paper up so tiny that it is actually not able to be recycled at all. Even if it were to make it to a manufacturer, those fibers are so small they won't reconnect and so are useless basically. The other reason is because the mechanical sorting equipment at the material recovery facility, things fall through the cracks that are any smaller than, say, a business card. So no matter what it is, if it's smaller than a business card, we don't want it anyway. And the answer to the question of can you put it in a bag, the answer is no, unfortunately. Now, the city often offers, and other organizations will also offer throughout the year, free shredding events and recycling events. Now, when you see a big truck and there's a Shred It logo on there, it's a professional shredding and recycling company, that is actually able to be recycled because the way it's shredded is large enough that it doesn't cut down the fibers so small, if that makes sense. So at home shredders, no, but professional shredders, that is recycled.
Although those are certainly still shredded in a way that is secure when you have privacy concerns with certain documents.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I will also mention that you can use home shredded paper for other things like gift wrapping. You can put it in the compost container, and some people even use it, especially in the animal medicine world, for kitty litter.
Thank you. Okay, we have one more question to get to, and then we're going to land this bird. So another question from Joe, who wants to know what entity will determine where a new landfill will be located if needed?
This obviously the state of North Carolina, DEC is what we call it. So what is it? Department of Environmental. I'm trying to think of the rest of it. I know it is DENR because it's been DENR for years.
Department of Environmental Quality is the new name.
There we go.
DENR, yes.
Yes. I always call it DENR. They permit landfills. So obviously that decision is theirs, whether it's publicly driven or privately driven. That's not a decision that, lies locally. Like I said, there's always opposition to permitting landfills. There's a lot of concerns environmentally. I mean, there's a lot of things to, steps to go through to permit a landfill, but it will not be our decision. We've had a great relationship with Republic, but I don't know what that's going to look like once our agreement with them for the Charlotte Motor Speedway landfill is done. None of those decisions have been made yet.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're just a few minutes over, but we really appreciate everybody taking the time to do this with us today. We have something exciting to share. For those who pre-registered for our webinar today on Zoom, you were entered into a random drawing to be the lucky winner of a compost bin. And I don't have a drum set, so I can't do a drum roll, unfortunately, but I can say that our lucky winner is Stacy Lambert. So congratulations, Stacy. And Stacy, we'll be reaching out to you so we can find a way to get that to you. But congratulations and thank you, and to everyone else who's joined us today. And Robin and Mandy, thank you both for your knowledge and your expertise. How can folks reach out to you if they want to continue this conversation or find out more?
Well, a real easy way for folks to learn more about environmental education services and find out how they can contact me is to go to concordnc.gov/learnee. That will get you connected real easily with me on social media, as well as all my contact information. And I think on the closing screen, you'll see my email address pop up as well.
Okay.
I don't have the fancy social media sites, but certainly, my email address is on the screen that Peter's showing right now. My phone number is on the website. I don't mind sharing it, but it's 704-920-5351. And I'm smart enough to leave all the educational, creative, fun stuff to Mandy. So I'm here for all the boring things like ordinances and policies and, operational crews going here and there. But if you need me for anything like that, feel free to reach out.
Okay, and so with that, we're going to conclude this at this point. Again, we thank you all for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of the day. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.